A very warm welcome, Eric Liebman, the Global Head of Travel at Ingenico. Thank you ever so much for joining me here in January 2021. We've made it to 2021.
Yeah.
So
No.
no, thanks ever so much, Eric, for joining us today. So lots of things I'd like to cover. Focuswire and Ingenico have been collaborating on a lot of things over the last year or so. We've got another webinar coming up, so I'm not sure if this recording will come out before or after the webinar, but it's all kind of loosely kind of tied together. But I think what would be useful for this particular discussion, Eric, is just kind of really dive in a little bit more on the concept of the connected trip. You and I have been speaking off air about this on and off for quite a few months now, but here we are on the record at last, as it were. So I just thought it'd be useful for us to have a chat about it. And I think really, let's kind of take a step back if we can. And if you can, Eric, just give us your sense of what you think the very basis of the connected trip is, first of all, just so we can kind of either bring ourselves up to speed or those that are kind of tuning in, because I think there's a lot of not discrepancy, but people have different kind of definitions of what the connected trip is.
Great. Thanks, Kevin, and thanks for having me on. Great to be here in 2021 for sure. We look at the connected trip as the new evolution, I guess, of travel. And if you think about the advent of us having this sort of command center in our hands, it gives us the opportunity to be intrinsic to any part of our travel.
Yep.
If you think about this 10 or 15 years ago, when you traveled, if there was, let's say there was a delay in your airline, well, you're picking up the phone and you're calling maybe your hotel and you're calling your car rental agency and maybe you're rebooking your dinner reservations or whatever it might be. And everything was sort of remote, or maybe you had a travel agent involved, whatever it might have been. Whereas now, I think with the advent of these great apps that are really kind of close to us at any time, we can, as travelers, really interact with any facet of our travel at any time and make things like changes or upgrades or check status or whatever at any given time. Mm-hmm. So we're no longer reliant sort of on this need to reach out and communicate and again, if you're making phone calls, but you happen to be in, wherever in Scandinavia where it's not going to be a local call, these sort of things were never very convenient. And so I look at the connected trip as being this sort of invisible thread that weaves the entire travel experience, the journey, into one, but puts me as the traveler in the center of that whole experience. So I'm the one kind of managing and reaching out to all the different parts, and I'm managing the destiny of that travel. So that's really the basis of it.
Yeah, and where do you think, on that basis of the connected trip, where do you think we are as an industry in kind of getting our heads around this connectivity between people and brands and timelines of trips and all the different elements that need to come together?
Wow, I think we're still a long way away because we have it in individual connections. So I think if you pick up your phone, you probably have a variety of travel supplier apps, your hotels, your airline, probably, maybe your OTAs, whoever it might be, but they're not threaded together yet. Yeah. And what I would like to see, and this is my vision of the future, is a sort of a master travel app that understands me, that has my payment information in the background, right? So I can seamlessly transact things, knows my preferences, can connect with the different facets of my travel. So again, to my earlier experience, imagine now I'm on a flight, I have Wi-Fi, so I'm connected, and the flight's delayed by 2 hours. So the app would automatically go out and, let's say, update the hotel with my arrival time, change my rental car, things like that, cancel my dinner reservation at 8 and make it for 10, kind of thing. So that would be, I think, this utopian version of things where it's very seamless and I don't have to do it. But right now, everything is still one by one. So I would still have to manually go in and change this, change that, change the other.
Yeah.
But at least I can do that.
What are some of the kind of the data considerations that brands need to be thinking about when it comes to the connected trip and tying all these elements together?
Well, in a perfect world, we would have the exchange of all the information about a customer that would be central again to the app. And the problem with sharing data, as you know, is that there are a lot of considerations GDPR, obviously, SCA, you have privacy laws in every different country. So it's not easy to do that. And I think that there are ways to genericize some of the data. There's ways to allow customers to opt in, for example, to gather this. But the main consideration is providing the kind of rich data between systems. So that could be a GDS for the airline, it could be a PMS for the hotel, could be the backend system for an OTA, whatever. To be able to share that information freely within this kind of ecosystem, if you will, about the connected trip, so that we can see again that one thing has these knock-on effects to others, and be able to utilize that data without breaching any of these protocols. And look, it's a constant battle for all of us, because we have to be very careful about what we do and what we distribute, both as a supplier and as a processor. But again, I think we're getting smarter at how we mask and manage that data to keep it safe.
Mm-hmm.
And again, given the right permissions from the user, and again from the apps, I think that we're finding distribution of this kind of stuff is getting more and more robust. So we're not there yet, but I think as we do, and as we get, again, people like us need to be able to prove that we can keep the data safe.
Mm-hmm.
But once we can, then we can start kind of playing around with how does that go to different players, so that, again, my information about my flight is shared with the hotel, for example, without any kind of interruption.
Those are some specific ones. Are there any other kind of broader challenges that brands need to be thinking about? And also, let's not be too negative and think about some of the kind of the wider big picture opportunities that perhaps you didn't mention in your initial kind of this is what it is all about.
Look, the biggest opportunity, I think, is that we want to make the traveler feel safe. We want to create as frictionless as an experience as possible. And so the whole point of this really is to say that I don't want to be interrupted. I don't want bottlenecks in my travel.
Right.
And there was an old, one of the hotel brands had this ad campaign that ran about surprises, right? Walking in, it was a hotel brand, they walk in the room and this, that, and it was those moments of letdown, right? And so what we'd like to do with this environment is create this experience where really from inception of, I want to go somewhere, to kind of returning home, that we've felt connected to the whole process. We know what's going on. We're involved in decisions about selecting my room, selecting my seat, upgrading, getting my baggage checked in, choosing my car, whatever it might be, that I have all these interactions with the whole transactions, rather than what happens now typically, which is you just kind of go up and wait and see what you get.
Yeah.
And that, I think, connection to it, and the disinterruption of how this would go from start to finish without having any of those bottlenecks, I think is really the zen of travel.
And, the industry isn't particularly famous for being quite particularly collaborative when it comes to sharing data and, I'll scratch your back if you scratch mine. I sense sometimes what we've been through this last 12 months has made the industry perhaps a little bit more kind of bigger picture and wider-eyed with the way it kind of thinks about these things. Do you agree with both parts of that we haven't been so collaborative in the past, but now this is perhaps the opportunity for us to be more collaborative?
Yeah, yes and yes. So I think historically we've been very cut off, and I remember back in 2003, I was with IBM on the consulting side, and we were trying to get a large network carrier and a large global hotel chain to use what we call the common user interface kiosk to say, hey, when I check in for my flight, why don't I check in for my hotel? So we'll just kind of have these web services that talk to each other and and forget it. It just, they know what if, and everybody, it's what I call the kind of the what if syndrome of, it's not possible. How can I assign a room? What if Kevin stays an extra day and I don't have and I think that they just were finding reasons not to do it. But I think, again, because we have to focus on a different type of traveler now,
Yep.
But even going forward, because we're training these millennials and the next wave of big travelers now on this new world. And so I think we're going to have to think differently. And I think the players that are going to really succeed, and by the way, there could be names that we don't even really think about right now.
Yep.
are going to be aiming at them to say, we're really going to make this super easy because you can do all these things together, and you're going to find maybe more of these kind of collaborative types of arrangements where one thing leads to this cascading of others.
Okay. So this is the bit where, you know, one of the main reasons why you're here, I mean, that you work for Ingenico. I mean, just give us then, from the Connected Trip perspective, if you can, Eric, what is the role of payments in all of this? Now, it may be an incredibly obvious question, but I'm sensing that it's a little bit more detailed than just, well, you pay for things throughout the connected parts of your trip. So how does it all kind of tie together from your perspective?
So great question, and thank you for asking. So payments is I think one of those behind the curtains kind of thing, right? We put our credit card in a machine, or we
Yeah.
simply click pay now and enter our details, and it all happens, and it's all good, right? We paid and we gone.
Yeah.
Whereas really the kind of intel inside, if you will, that goes on behind there. So what happens between that point, it going out to the issuing banks and to the card networks and all these things and coming back, is actually pretty darn complex. And there's a lot goes on, and you can imagine there's a tremendous amount of security and stability and whatnot required.
Yeah.
But we kind of look at this whole process of you can book a first class suite room on on Singapore Airlines to go from X to Singapore and back. It's a $25,000 ticket. You can be ready to go. All wonderful. If you can't pay for it, if your credit card is declined or your payment method is declined, well, you're not going. It's all aspiration. So really, to me, that's kind of the summation of it, is that until you see those words payment approved, it's not a thing.
Yeah.
And so really, we feel like the last mile, if you will, of every transaction is just getting that kind of authorization that yes, you can pay for this, you're good to go. So sitting in the back end of all of these kind of connected pieces to your trip is the ability to pay, authenticate now with SCA coming in full force just a few days ago, and all these things that need to happen or nothing happens. And that's the point. So we can put all the great processes in place, but the fact is, if your credit card declines or your bank rejects a transaction or whatever it might be, all bets are off. So we have to be in the background ensuring that, one, we provide the appropriate breadth of payment methods for the people that are going to use them, because one size does not fit all in the world. Two, that those systems are up and running. And three, that we provide the highest level of approval rates possible. And that sometimes means switching acquirers at the back end to ensure that at the end of the day, the highest percentage of people who are traveling are going to get approved for that thing and go. So that's where we sit there.
Okay, so that's Ingenico Travel. I mean, what do you particularly understand about the travelers' needs, would you say, that other companies don't? Especially in the light of what we know we've all been going through over the last 11 and a half months, really. Now.
Yeah. The big difference, I think, between some of the providers, and we're one of the largest in the world, particularly in the travel space, but the real rubber hits the road for us is that we come from the industry. Yep. So the guys on my team, I've got a pretty large global team, believe all of them come from the travel industry. So we get it from the inside out. So we're not talking purely transactional, or we're not talking about, the different types of payments, whatever. We're talking about, how does payment support your business as a whole to give your guests or your passengers or your customers the absolute best experience? And sometimes that's making the payment as invisible as possible, like Uber, right? I mean, Uber is great. Do you think about payment? No, it happens seamlessly. But the fact that it does is what makes Uber so great, right? You don't have to stop and hand a credit card or cash, whatnot. So we're really looking at the same thing. How do we, create that? And understanding the customer coming from the industry is a big difference between trying to sell payments into travel. So that's one. The second is, I think that because of our global footprint, we really have and truly have on the ground experience with the nuances of the many different types of people out there. And again, parlaying that back to the industry itself means that we get that, hey, a guy living in country X doesn't have a credit card. So if you don't offer their payment type, X Pay, whatever it might be, they're just not going to be able to book with you. And so that means that you're saying to that customer, hey, I want your business, but I'm not going to meet your preferences or your expectations. So really, for us having this A, experience of the industry, and B, the global breadth that we have, and our kind of, footprint that's truly around the world, we're working with customers now every day to say, hey, listen, this is what you should be doing in Russia, for example. Everybody loves Russian business, but nobody offers the Mir card or rubles, right? So we can say, hey, look, this is a big kind of feeder source for you. If you offer this currency, you can see your business go up. And we do. And we can actually see business improve. So I think those kind of nuances that we bring are really impactful, and it really benefits both sides of the equation, right? It's better for customers and it's better for the businesses.
It's been some obviously fairly big news in the world of Ingenico as a business fairly recently. I mean, what does the Worldline partnership mean for the travel industry and your particular customers, would you say, Eric?
Yeah, it's a great thing. And I think outside of Europe, I know not a lot of people are familiar with the Worldline brand, because I know they were certainly very, very large in Europe and other parts. But what it does for us is it gives us access to more resources to do things. It gives us access to more funding for innovation and for growing our product set. It gives us, as a larger company, honestly, it's a better position to be negotiating with some of our suppliers and our banking partners. We have more general partnerships in the business. Worldline had a tremendous group of partner assets that they brought to the table, and the people, right? We inherited more people also from the travel industry, and so in the payments world, bigger is definitely better. Yeah. I think there are a lot of great niche players out there, and I'm not dissing them because I think a lot of them bring tremendous value. But in an overall picture, if you are a global network carrier or a large hotel group or an OTA or someone, you really want to have that size, because then that your business is being managed anywhere in the world by people who really get it and who can also bring tremendous value back to you by this tremendous amount of assets that we have.
What would you say is your advice or Ingenico's advice for the industry as we start to, fingers crossed, Eric, start to wrap our heads around some form of recovery now that we are in 2021? I mean, how do you help to, dare I say it, speed up the recovery if you can?
So that's a great question. Believe me, we spent a lot of time thinking about that. I think the most important thing now is to really take the time and focus on your customer holistically and really understand who they are, what their preferences are, where they're coming from, what the new needs are going to be, right? And I think that, quite honestly, I've traveled a lot. I've been to French Polynesia, I've been to the Caribbean, I've been around the US and whatnot. And so, I have to support my industry. So I've been out. And I can say that without exception, there are a lot of protocols in place, which is great. Mm-hmm. The thing is that what I've appreciated is that we've taken that herding aspect in travel, and obviously we can't do it now. It's just not feasible. So they've completely diminished that whole experience of queuing up and waiting. And I would love to see that continue. And I would hope that the industry says, hey, I think we figured out a better way to travel, and this is it. And so it will, I'm sure, change over time, and it may loosen to some degree. Mm-hmm. But we've learned that we can actually manage people and manage travel without that kind of great element of queuing up. And again, talking about, payment being the bottleneck, that certainly was always a thing, right? Because if you're queuing up to pay, at an airline counter, or you're queuing up to check into a hotel, or you're queuing up with your car rental counter, or, cruise lines, like everything was all about queuing up. Whereas we can really create this fully digital environment where all of this can be done without having to have, direct interaction, or without having to have people lining up and whatnot. And so that's what I think the industry needs to embrace, is to say, hey, we've figured this out, and we're still working it out. It's only been 11 months, but let's continue on this trend of let's go digital. So if we're traditionally not businesses like that, like car rentals, I mean, as you know, right, car rentals is a great example of because I know they need you to sign a lot of forms, but they're now getting more and more online. Hotel chains are famous for that they collect credit card data, but then you are still required to check in when you arrive and show your credit card. Mm-hmm. So these kind of things, I think, taking that one-to-one interaction out where it has to stop the process is going to be, I think, really key to getting people back up and traveling again to where they have confidence that they can go through this process without having to be amongst loads of people, whether there's a pandemic or not, right? And that's where I really think they should be focused on.
And last of all, Eric, if we can, I mean, what kind of new products are on the horizon that you think will be useful to either brands to recover faster, or just kind of just get them, frankly, back in the recovery mode, as it were?
Well, we really took advantage of what we call the pause in the in the industry to
Yeah.
focus on product development, focus on process improvement and whatnot. And so, we've been busy in the background, and we have two products that I'd like to focus on. We have a number of them, probably a little bit more industry specific, but broader application. One is our Travel Hub application, which was really purpose built for the travel industry. It's a brilliant bit of software that essentially acts like the old AT&T switchboard. So, you have one message coming in from whatever part of the ecosystem in travel you are, whether it's a GDS system or it could be a PMS system, and then that will intelligently parse the information coming in and send the transaction to either a local processor in the country that the customer is looking to buy in,
Okay.
or through a more optimized, higher authorization rate, whatever it might be. So it's very much around about moving a transaction to the most optimal way to process it. That's one. And then the second is we've recently relaunched our Insights program.
Okay.
And I think, as obviously as one of the largest, payment processors in the world, one would expect that we have great reporting and business intelligence, and we do. And so that's what Insights is. It really gives you the opportunity to look at this, almost forensically and see, hey, where's this coming from? How do I benchmark against others? What is the kind of opportunities that I'm missing? And I think I alluded earlier, one of the earliest examples we had this when we launched was a customer who, when we looked at their business, saw that they had a tremendous amount of business coming out of Russia, but they didn't offer the local cards. So they were having to do it on a cross-border basis, which is more expensive, lower authorization rates, perhaps more time, whatever, and certainly not convenient if you happen to live in Russia. So we opened up our domestic Russia processing for them, and we saw their business increase by a pretty significant percentage. So these kinds of things that we can do with Insights and what we call our payment performance analysis, that can really help out customers. And I think, again, it's the type of service you would expect, but when you get in and see how easy it is to use, I think it's quite impactful to the business.
Okay. We've come to the end of our discussion. Thank you so much. I'm glad that we were able to kind of give some big picture things as well about what we both agree is everything around the connected trip, and also learn a little bit about what Ingenico and Worldline are doing, both collaboratively and individually. So Eric Liebman, the global head of travel for Ingenico, thank you so much for joining us at Focuswire today. Wish you well for the rest of the year.
You too. A pleasure.